This episode is brought to you by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. IT Pro TV offers an on-demand course library with more than 3,300 hours of content. Watch on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams with a special offer for Security Weekly listeners. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly to start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off a standard or premium IT Pro TV membership using the code SECWeekly30. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Thank you to our sponsor, itpro.tv. We use them, and you should too. Alrighty, we got a fantastic technical, well, I think it's going to be fantastic if they got their demo working. If not, it'll still be fantastic. We're going to turn it over to John Strand and Geoff Thayer. And what is the title of your technical segment, and what problem are you trying to solve?
So the first thing is I came up with a PowerPoint just in case, and it's the most lame Caldera PowerPoint because the tool crashed.
Complete with typos,
absolutely have
and
to.
Complete with spelling mistakes.
It does. It's in there. It's in there. Because Paul, you would expect that to be in there.
And he used a blank background to boot.
Yeah, exactly. I literally typed that like just minutes ago. So what is the problem we are trying to solve, Geoff? Well, I'll start out by saying threat intelligence feeds, the vast majority of them are absolute complete garbage because you have no idea how to incorporate a threat intelligence feed and actually make your organization better. They become a collection of stories about other hacks and other places, and very rarely do we actually learn from the narratives of those particular attacks that we are dealing with. So one of the things we've been discussing for quite some time with our customers is the MITRE attack matrix. And I want to explain why this is fundamentally different. Whenever you're talking about threat intelligence feeds, the vast majority of them get really hung up on who is this threat actor and what are the techniques this threat actor is doing. And that's horrible. And we should never look at things that way. And I want to use kind of an analogy story as to why. Human beings, whenever we look at threats, right? Whenever we look at a threat, we base it upon some type of historical knowledge that has happened to either us individually or has happened to the tribe. So if you go back thousands and thousands of years ago, Ugg ate a mushroom and Ugg died. And other people looked around at Ugg and they're like, we shouldn't eat that mushroom. So our threat intelligence matrix basically said, don't eat that freaking mushroom. And the other one I like to say is somebody saw a bear. They said, that thing looks cuddly and warm. Went and snuggled with the bear, got mauled, and they're like, okay, don't cuddle with bears. Now, the idea is a human's perception of threats is static. We think that the mushroom is static, the bear is static, the wild, crazy, salivating dog is static. And we believe that if we can identify static threats, then we'll be able to avoid those static threats. And that's just not true, because whenever you look at modern threat actors as it relates to cybersecurity, the techniques that the threat actors use are going to shift. Like the ways that we'll bypass antivirus are going to change. The ways that we move laterally are going to change. So what MITRE did, I don't know if this was intentionally or somewhat inadvertently, is they started collecting all these different techniques of threat actors, and they put it into this master matrix of all the different types of techniques that they see bad guys using for persistence, privilege escalation, evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, execution, collection, exfiltration, and command and control. And what's amazing is while the number of threat actors continues to grow very, very rapidly, this matrix is actually staying relatively static. And the reason why is many attackers will come up a number of ways to do defensive evasion. But once they're on the system, they tend to use the same techniques for lateral movement or command line execution or API execution. And really at this point for threat actors, it becomes picking up a series of Legos, like you see here on this technique matrix, and actually choosing and building their own attack path as it goes. So what we can do as defenders is instead of trying to find a way to defend against every single type of threat actor that's out there, we can start testing our capability to detect these commonly used techniques that bad guys use for privilege escalation, credential access, lateral movement, execution, and so on. Now, there's something called the Red Canary released their Atomic Red Team toolkit. Let me see if I got it right here. Their Atomic Red Team. And they've got a whole collection of a series of scripts of different ways that you can test the MITRE attack matrix by simply running through their scripts that they have provided. Now, this is also really incredibly valuable. Unfortunately, you would have to go to every single one of these scripts and run each of these scripts manually. Now, there's been some efforts to try to tie this together and automate this as much as possible, and that's really, really, really cool. We need to see more of that as it relates to Atomic Red Team. But MITRE also released a tool called Caldera, and I'd like Joff to talk a little bit about some of our problems getting this very beta product from MITRE working. So, Joff, what are some of the trials and tribulations that you went through to get us to this point where we have a functioning instance of Caldera?
Yeah, you mean the trials and tribulations that I went through literally in the last 30 minutes. So Caldera is definitely an early release, but it has the right intentions.
I thought Caldera was an older Linux distribution.
Well, there is that
man,
too.
you're
There is
dating
some
all of us
duplication
now.
there on the name.
Paul's also very familiar.
Well, I thought Yellowstone was the Caldera.
I am technically dating all of you in some way, yes.
Paul is also very familiar with early release.
We're renaming it MITRE Super Volcano.
Wow. I mean, why is it whenever I talk on this show, everybody wants to get in my way? I mean, what is that?
I actually like interruptions.
So,
Joff, we don't get in your way while you're talking. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
you wait.
what an
You'll
asshole.
get
I'm
yours.
sorry, Joff, continue.
I'm coming up there to visit you in a couple of weeks. Okay. The Caldera consists of a Mongo database in the back end, running on an Ubuntu or Debian-like system. In this particular case,
Wait, I thought it was Caldera Linux.
Yeah,
Shut up,
Linux. And it's running. I can't even talk. It's running as it's a Python 3 project, multi-threaded Python 3 project that has a web front end, and it's actually able to run Python scripts in the back end to perform various functions that attempt to map out various components of the attack matrix. And so, with that in mind, it's it's a really nice tool. Now, in terms of nice tool when it grows up a little bit, I'll qualify that. But in terms of the trials and tribulations of getting it running, well, there's a couple of things. First thing is you actually have to put an agent on the endpoints that are going to talk to the Caldera server to actually get the beginnings of a remote access Trojan deployed. Now, the interesting thing is Caldera actually makes a differentiation between an agent, which is going to communicate with the server, and the actual remote access Trojan. The agent actually deploys the Trojan. The Trojan then goes ahead and does the various scripted actions associated with the MITRE attack framework based on directives that we supply through the web interface. In terms of getting it up and running, not tremendously difficult as long as you have MongoDB installed, follow the basic directives of setting the MongoDB configuration, and that involves just actually configuring in the replication feature correctly. And then making sure you have the correct Python 3 dependencies installed. And this part's really important. You cannot depend on Python 2.x. It has to be a Python 3 installation, and it has to be a Python 3 pip package as well. The easy install package has to be Python 3. Otherwise, you're going to fail there as well. But all in all, once you get those dependencies installed, actually running Caldera involves using Python 3, passing in a master script, caldera.py, and then accessing the web UI, changing the default password like we all should do for best practices, right? And then starting to interact with the system itself. Now, John, you want me to go a little further in terms of interaction?
I'll take over.
Go through the
I'll
basics.
take over here for
I'm
the
just curious,
but
Joff,
Paul, you had a question.
Yeah, is the front end, is it Flask or is it Django or?
So the front end, I believe. Well, actually, that's a good question. I believe it's Django. Let's have a look.
It doesn't really matter.
You know what? I
I'm
haven't
just
had
curious.
time.
Yes.
I'll be dead honest.
Now my question is it Unchained or is it just regular?
Regular Django or
Django Unchained.
Right?
Django Unchained. It's Django blockchain, actually.
Django
Django blockchain? Yeah.
No.
You know what? I'll answer that question right now because, at risk of breaking the demo, I won't break the demo, John. I promise.
Sorry, I
Prompt,
asked.
don't
Okay,
break
sorry.
the demo.
Continue.
I'm going
All
to
right,
throw
so-
Wappalizer at it really quick, just to
Oh, boy.
double check. And
And it's
Sorry,
broken.
it's all my fault.
No.
It's all-
no, we broke
Let
the
us get
demo.
through this.
No, I
Let us get through
didn't
this
break the
demo.
demo. Trust me, I didn't break the demo. All
So,
right.
John, you're
Yeah, I
taking
haven't
over,
touched anything. All right.
All right. So it is a Bootstrap web framework. It's jQuery running in the front end. So it is not Django by the looks. So it's a combination of jQuery and straight up Python in the back end. So there you go.
And all joking aside, like this thing did go down. It crashed on us right before the show, hence my hastily put together PowerPoint presentation. But if it actually, it does work. We should say that, Joff, it does work. It just doesn't really like to work very much. We can get it to go through, do a series of tests on a single host or a couple hosts. And then if you try to run multiple runs of it, it tends to start getting bogged down. So it really needs some testing that can be done. But I kind of want to walk through the overall flow of how it works. So the first thing is you have to put the agent on systems. And Joff, didn't you run into an issue with the agent that MITRE has for Caldera?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Actually, wasn't the agent itself. There's a couple of things here. MITRE provides you with the agent as a precompiled executable, which will go on the system happily, and that works. The other piece that you have to provide as part of the installation is the remote access Trojan. And MITRE also provides us with precompiled remote access Trojan binaries, one of them for Windows 8 and up and one for Windows 7 and down. One of the things I learned very, very quickly is that your commonly garden antivirus vendor completely SIGs on those remote access Trojans. So what I did in response to that was I downloaded the source code of the remote access Trojan, threw in a bunch of base64 random crap into the source, recompiled it so that the AV didn't actually flag on the remote access Trojan, because
Lovely.
that was actually a terminating event in terms of being able to demonstrate this. Yeah, that's the kind of interesting
At
challenges
least the
I ran
AV
into.
vendors are up on the latest Trojan.
Well, I think it's
No.
so far, even just at this point, pretty compelling that rolling something yourself or using open source to complete this type of attack simulation in your network is challenging at best.
Yeah, it was challenging to get it up, no pun intended. And
Because of the
once I
early
got
release.
it up, well, as John will demonstrate, there are further challenges. One of the other challenges that I ran into was one of the Python scripts, and I need to submit a pull request for this. One of the Python scripts to enumerate the computers and the version of the operating systems actually had a bug in it where it didn't understand that if unknown comes back from the operating system on the network, it tried to split it in Python parlance with a space by default and threw an exception. And in Caldera, unfortunately, anything that throws an exception in the main line of the code tends to crash the entire thing. So,
That's bad.
you could run one module and it broke the entire thing. So I was like, well, I'm this guy that teaches this class for SANS. It's called Sec 573, Automating Information Security with Python. So I thought, I just think I might have the skills to fix this problem.
But I thought Python was you said it was multi-threat. Never mind.
That's there's part of
well-
your problem right there.
Well,
Mongo, Python 3, multi-threaded.
all right, stop that. Just back
Web
away
web
from the
interface.
computer.
Yep. Back away slowly.
So anyway, I
So-
fixed one of the modules, but I do need to submit a pull request on that. But this thing definitely has some development steps to go, and I think I should shut up now and let John actually
That's okay.
display some
and-
of my network, basically.
And we've kind of ripped on it, and that's mainly because it died right literally before the show. But it actually does some really, really cool things. There's a lot of promise. I mean, we have a beta product that's kind of kicked out. It's free. It automates a lot of the stuff with the MITRE attack matrix. We can only really complain about it so much because I know some poor people that are working on this thing are listening to the show and they're like, oh my God, they completely ripped on our tool. And it's okay. Anytime you release anything for free, fully expect to get beat up and ridiculed online. And honestly, all joking aside, we should give the people that put this together our thanks because it is neat. And if it just had a little bit more debugging, it would be great. So with this tool, it automates a lot of the MITRE attack framework, but not all of it. So whenever you're trying to set this up, first you have to have a series of hosts that are attached to it. And that requires you actually sending agents and installing agents on systems. And a lot of these agents right now that are fired up are from Rapid City Office and also from JOF's network as well. So we have a number of agents all over the place. And I have 5 connected agents. And if you want to send commands to these agents, you can just go ahead and run a command. And I'll just choose one of them. And I can do who am I? And if the agent's alive, it's going to come back and it's say, oh, you're running a system. I can do ipconfig, and then it'll run the command. It'll come back and give you the IP address. So you can actually interact with the individual agents. So it is literally like a little command and control server that allows you to communicate with multiple different systems.
No, don't,
So
don't terminate Joff's Skype process.
Terminate. I hope this isn't Joff's personal computer. That would be funny.
So John and Joff, what
No comment.
What secures the communication from the controller onto all these agents?
That's an excellent
given that
question.
you can do things like
They
deploy
actually
malware
have
and run
multiple
commands.
different ways of communicating. And that's actually important, right, Joff? Because so it isn't necessarily an issue of securing the communications between the agent and the actual server itself. No. Whenever you're running this tool, you can actually choose how the communication is going to go. I think it's like raw TCP, HTTP, and HTTPS. Is that correct, Joff?
Well, actually, not quite. The actual agent itself. Remember that we're separating the agent from the remote access Trojan.
From the RAT,
right?
yeah.
There's 2 different entities there. The actual agent itself, when you install it, actually uses TLS over TCP port 8888. If anybody was really curious, that's the default. When you install that agent, you're actually installing it as a service on the system that you're deploying on the endpoint itself, right? And you give it a URL root, which is the actual central Caldera server, and then you give it a certificate that it uses for TLS communication back and forth from the client to the server. So the agent communications is definitely TLS. Now, in terms of the different modules, that's an entirely different beast, and that's what John was kind of getting into.
Yep. So this is me communicating with agents right now. So after we have established that we have a series of agents that are connected into Caldera, we can start developing a couple of additional things. We can actually create an adversary. Let me view some of the default adversaries. They have Alice and Bob and Charlie and Lazarus and Simple.
And
And
APT
you can
29.
create. Oh yes.
APT 29, yeah.
What's that?
Nothing.
So we can create a new adversary and we can give it a name. PSW. We can say what steps are going to be executed. Now, these are the steps that are out of the MITRE attack framework. So you can do select all, which I don't really recommend doing, but you can, and it'll try to execute all of the scripts. You can do the exfil method. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. You can set it up as raw TCP, HTTP, HTTPS. You can put the exfil address of what these agents are supposed to connect back to, which is usually your IP address and the port that it's going to connect to. Now, after you have identified an adversary that you are going to create, you can then look at networks. So if I look at the existing networks, we currently have the JOFNet, which is only 2 systems, and I'll explain that here in a couple of seconds. Or you can create a new network, and you can give it a name.
Yes,
and then
really
you can give it a domain associated with it, and then which hosts you want to have associated with that specific network as well. So I can change this over to this, and then look at these 3 hosts, and now I've added in these hosts on the domain in Rapid. Click Submit, and now we have a network of hosts. We have a threat actor profile that's been created, and now we can go about actually creating an operation. So with an operation, we create our operation, we give it a name. Choose an adversary, so I can create the adversary that any of the adversaries that we have here, like simple. Choose the network it's going to execute on, and then we can also choose a starting host. Now, the starting host is a way that you can actually test for lateral movement as well. And then you can choose how you want the rat to actually execute and what's the process that it's going to be associated with as well. So like the parent process can be Explorer, exe, and so on. Then you can actually have it clean itself up. And Geoff, I thought this was kind of cute. You can have it run a bunch of different things. And then whenever it executes those things, it will automatically clean up its mess afterwards, which I think is pretty nice as well.
Yeah,
now, if we
so
go
for
to
example,
the
a couple
operations,
of the
anybody
modules,
have a
John?
question? Yes.
Yeah, we're talking over each other. A couple of the modules, for example, were to test persistence by throwing in a run key into the registry in HKLM or HKU. And the auto cleanup operation, if you test those kinds of things, will actually remove those registry keys after it's done. So it's actually fairly neat and tidy with itself in that respect.
Cool. And then when it runs, it'll run the series of tasks that you have specified for it to run. And it will enumerate like users on the domain, DNS information, get the time on the systems and user profiles. It'll basically run a whole bunch of commands that your SOC should be able to identify if you all of a sudden have a system on the inside of your network start executing them. So that's really where the value proposition for this tool comes in. While it is a little bit buggy, without question, especially whenever you try to run it on multiple computer systems, if you run it on a single system and you just kind of let it run and you actually get a bunch of steps that actually execute successfully, this is the point where you would go back to your SIM, you'd go back to your security operations center, and you would start asking your security team, hey, did you guys detect anything strange on the network? Because this thing should light up like a Christmas tree whenever you do fire it off on an agent or two on a network. So really, if we go back to what is the core problem that we're trying to solve, we're trying to define our ability to detect adversaries on our network. And this tool allows you to do that emulation of what an adversary does on a network in a free, automated fashion that's automatically correlated to the attack matrix, which is an attack matrix pulled from real-world attacks that we are seeing today for you to test the overall effectiveness of your security controls. So yes, we had to fight around with it a little bit, but we got it up and running. Geoff got it up and running more than once today. And it does fire off. And when it does, you should get some very useful information for your security operations center to figure out where your blind spots are. So that's Caldera, a fantastic tool, a little bit beta, but just an amazing hats off opportunity for the folks at Caldera. So I want to open it up to questions, comments from the rest of the fine hosts at Security Weekly.
Does it give you
I do have one additional thing to add. That I discovered during a setup and as I was running different modules, there is a couple of modules to try to exercise privilege escalation. These modules, such as unquoted service path, such as being able to write to the directory that a service executable is running in, being able to schedule a task, the stuff that we would do on a pen test, basically, to attempt privilege escalation. So, of course, being a pen tester, I immediately said, well, hey, I'd like to try and do that stuff. I wonder if it's actually going to follow through and escalate privileges. Well, it turns out that it does not follow through and escalate privileges. Now, I got to think that's on the roadmap somewhere down the road, but right now it did not escalate, and so I was a little bit disappointed. I was like, "Oh man, I want it to escalate!" Right?
I think they're literally just throwing commands and hoping that people will detect them. That's kind of the way I'm looking at a lot of these scripts whenever I was digging into them.
That's right. It is throwing commands and leaving trails of evidence and doing threat emulation. That's where it's at right now, which is fantastic. And you also would notice that when you actually create an operation, you do have the ability to tell the agent to run the remote access Trojan either as NT Authority system or to run it as the current user that's logged into that system. So that gives you a different view of privilege versus unprivileges, and the modules will act slightly differently based on whether you're running it with privilege or not. For example, there's a Mimikatz module that will try to dump creds. John, please don't look at the creds in my network.
No. In the Mimikatz module, it pretty much drops the vanilla Mimikatz on a system. So any modern AV should be able to detect it fairly
exactly.
easily.
And the very first thing I noticed, of course, was I think I had Symantec there, which I promptly removed from the system. But both Defender and Symantec fired a SIG immediately that it dropped generic Mimikatz on there. But that's okay. That's part of
That's
it.
all part of the test.
We'll go to Jeff for one question before we close out this segment and move to the next one.
My question is, and again, this is related to sort of recent news that we'll pick up shortly in our news segment. What's created for good? How can it be misused? Is this free for anybody? How do you get it? Is it something that's beta for a while that they're trying to hopefully sell to people?
GitHub, and yeah, it's free for anybody.
Okay.
Windows only?
No.
Yes,
It's well, let's just say the client side in terms of threat emulation is definitely Windows Active Directory domain focused. I don't believe they're going to stay there though, because it looks like they're thinking in terms of multiple endpoint varieties going down the road. But I mean, that's just the way I'm seeing it because of the way
they've already got it here in the Matrix coverage. They've already got a tab for Mac and Linux, so it definitely looks like they're heading that way, and they're adding in more scripts all the time.
But remember, the backend is running on a Linux server, right? The backend's running MongoDB and Python 3 and everything.
I meant the
right?
agent and the Trojans and stuff. Is it just Windows?
Yeah,
based?
right now.
Yeah.
Right now,
They're Windows, and you had to wire up your own binary by compiling it in Visual Studio if you didn't want your AV to catch it either. So
Awesome. Thanks, guys. With that, we'll take a short break. Come back with the security news for this week. Stay tuned.